Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Design, Diversity, and Data with Jacinda Walker as part of our second annual Midwest Design Week. My name is Amber Cox, and I volunteer as president of AIGA Louisville, one of the 70 plus chapters of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. This week, we have really exciting events that focus on our theme of access to design, including tonight's event, Allowing Opportunity and Creating a Channel for It with Ariana Cruz, in collaboration with AIGA Unidos, and our closing keynote event on Friday lunch hour, Thank You for Your Feedback by Liz Jackson and Alex Hogard, founding members of the Disabled List. This would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors this year. Thank you to Saatchi and Saatchi X, the University of Arkansas Graphic Design Program, Creatives on Call, Salesforce, Deckel and Moneypenny, and to the rest of our sponsors. We are grateful for your support and honored that you have entrusted us to fulfill our goals for Midwest Design Week in a meaningful way. If you have any specific accommodations to ensure a great Midwest Design Week experience, please don't hesitate to reach out to our Midwest Design Week organizing team members on Slack, and we will do the best that we can to provide you with what you need. That being said, we're ready to get started. I'm very excited to introduce today's speaker, Jacinda Walker. Jacinda Walker, MFA, is renowned for her work in design, diversity, research, and strategy. She's the founder and creative director of Design Explorer, a social enterprise whose mission addresses the diversity gap within the design profession. Her research on design journeys, strategies for increasing diversity in design disciplines has been hailed as a breakthrough work. The solutions-based thesis explores diversity in design disciplines and investigates effective strategies to expose Black and Latino youth to design careers. Ms. Walker's future goals are to help scale diversity in design initiatives within education institutions, corporations, organizations, and museums. Now, I'll hand things over to Jacinda. Jacinda, feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
All righty, share, here, share, and then I'm going to press play full screen. All right, the phrase of 2021. Can you see my slides?
Yes. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. I am here today to talk with you about a lot of things, but mostly this thing called data. And so I just want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about myself. My pronouns are she and her. I'm from the great state of Ohio. I love working with young people. I really don't like yogurt or spicy foods. I don't care what y'all say about it. I just can't. I know. But the biggest thing that you should know about me is that I am a bit of a data nerd. I didn't think I was this much of a nerd, but anybody who goes this deep down in research, you've got to learn a little bit about data on the particular topic that you're investigating. And so today I want to talk to you about the data dive that occurred while I was doing my research work, design journeys, strategies for increasing diversity in design disciplines. And I want to talk with you about the top 10 sources and places where you too can collect data to get grants, to learn more about your customers, learn more about the users, just this whole piece of it and how it can help really boost and add value, much more value to the work that you're doing currently. So, to talk a little bit about design journeys, where I started from, this research work is a solutions based thesis. So, it introduces four main deliverables. And I will talk a little bit about the deliverables as we move through the presentation today. But I want to start you with really how I got started figuring out and trying to figure out what is this thing called data. And so the first thing that we did was have to really like look and find out where people are. Now understand that a lot of the data that is around this particular topic did not exist before 1999. In fact, the AIA, that is the first year that they began to separate the data within the certification of its architects. So currently, when we talk about the lack of diversity in design and the data that goes with that, what's most important to understand is that having good data, having credible data, consistent data is really important to being able to show your findings and to be able to help combat this particular wicked problem. Now, currently, there are 1,237,000 designers self-identified through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, this chart that you're seeing here shows a little bit of the disparity that we currently are seeing in the profession. We've collected data for this particular infographic that you're looking at from the Higher Education Arts Data Summary as well as the NASSAT reports. And again, we're going to talk deep down about those as well. So hold and put your questions in the chat so that I don't forget to come back to anything. What's most important to understand about the visual that you're seeing right now is that we still in 2021 have single digit representation. And when we have that type of thing, it's called a disparity. And so you see that when you're looking at the African American students, you see that when you're looking at the African American designers, you see that when you're looking at the Latino architects, and you're able to really understand what that is. But because we typically in data talk about numbers in percents, I wanted to take a moment to make sure that I explained what 6% is. 6% out of this 1,237,000 is 72,000 designers. 72,000 self-identified Black designers are in the profession right now. In our faculty, we're looking at about 342 design educators. So this really means that even if every one Black design educator wanted to mentor every one of the students that are currently happening right now, we still would be short. We still would not have enough people to help get the work done. And so that ultimately takes me to what's going on in the profession within the disciplines. And so there are 295,000 self-identified graphic designers. This discipline is 52% female, and right now we are looking at 7% for representation for Black graphic designers. We're also looking at 11,000 industrial designers. Again, single digit representation for African American industrial designers and no data values for Asian designers, meaning that this is a number that's less than 1%. And currently this profession is 54% female. We're also looking at UX and UI designers. Now, the Census Bureau labels you all as digital and user interface designers. So if you're going down the data report that's the category that profession will be under. That is 45% female, and again, single digit representations. There are 131,000 interior designers self-identified, all from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This discipline is 84% female and showing single digit representation for African American and Latino industrial designers. And then last but not least, our certified colleagues architects. There are about 190,000 of these across the United States. The profession is 28% female, single digit representation for African American and Latina architects again. And I also recently uncovered that the AIA as well as NCARB have officially announced that there are finally 500 certified Black female architects in the United States of America in 2020. Now, the thing about having all of this data and understanding and beginning to uncover trends really allowed me to understand more about the problem. And so for me and the work that we've done here at Design Explorer, we believe that the lack of diversity in design, the reason it hasn't been solved is because we as a profession continue to treat it as a one-off problem. We keep thinking, oh, it's just the pipeline. Oh, we just got to hire more people of color. Oh, we just have to have more people in school right now. When in all actuality, if we begin to look at this and acknowledge that this is a wicked problem and that to solve wicked problems, they require multiple methods of solving as well as persons working to solve the problem, we will understand that the problem isn't just one. The problem is a multiple problems along the journey of becoming a designer. So ultimately, wherever you are is where a problem exists, and that problem might be associated with access, exposure, opportunity, or value. And ultimately, to really combat this, we have to begin to overlap these three things, so that we can get the benefit of the exposure. Now, the first deliverable in the design journey's thesis research work is the design journey map. It is compiled of 4 color coded passages: foundations, workforce, proficiency, and influence. The 4 color coded bins, they are areas where designers travel through to move on in their career. The gray triangles represent and they illustrate the places where designers do not transition to the next passage and they fall out of the journey, as well as career competency components that are listed in the first 3 passages of the journey. The second deliverable are the 15 strategic ideas. These 15 strategic ideas are color coded to match the passage that they're going to be most effective in and most feasible for solving. The third deliverable are the design principles. These 4 design principles are metrics that I still use now to help uncover and relive and deliver and analyze many of the programs that we utilize here at Design Explorer. The first principle is comprehensive. This means that your solution should meet multiple passages. We're in a place of single digit representation. We are not at a place where we can only have solutions reach 1 or 2 audiences. We have to be able to reach larger numbers at a large amount of times. Solutions also need to be collaborative. This means that parents and professionals might have to begin to work together to ultimately solve and create better opportunities for the young people that are coming through. The third one is local. This means that the solution needs to go directly to where the need is. Being able to have solutions that create barriers when they have to travel or when they have to access or when they have to utilize equipment or technology that they don't have to come to you to get those things actually is an inconvenience for them. So we have to begin to think deeper about how can we create solutions that go directly to where the need is. And then last but not least is scholastics. Here in Ohio, we're losing a lot of great designers, a lot of great young designers due to this scholastics challenge. Scholastics challenges are things like if you don't get your English credits, you don't graduate. If you don't pass geometry, you won't graduate. If you're not able to get your sociology and your civics courses, you don't graduate. And so these types of things really play a big part in helping young designers transition from one passage to the other. And then the last deliverable is Design Explorer. Design Explorer, our mission addresses the diversity gap within the design profession. We work to create collaborations, we coordinate diversity building initiatives, and we work to connect stakeholders to resources. Our main goal here at Design Explorer is to make sure that all the best people are leading the way for the next generation of design. I put this small short video together so you could see a little bit about what we've been doing for the last 5 years. To date, we've been very, very, very fortunate. We've done more than 200 of these talks across the United States of America. We've reached more than 3,900 students with our 6 impact modules and our 7 design programs. And to date, more than 2,500 people have downloaded the 293-page rant that I had on the lack of diversity in design disciplines. But today, I want to talk to you about the data behind the report. I want to talk to you about where I found it, how I found it. I want to share with you what data is and just a whole mess of things. I'm also going to share the top 10 spots where you too can find data that looks at the lack of diversity in design disciplines. So, what is data? Now, data is defined as facts and statistics collected together or for reference and for or analysis. It's the characteristics or information, right? The word data is Latin for to give something, right? So when we talk about what is data, we have to begin to understand what is the difference between data versus information. So data can only be used in research only after it's been processed and converted into information. So think of this maybe as like corn and cornmeal, right? The data is the numbers. The data is, hey, the raw stats and statistics and things that came out of that were uncovered during the research phase or during data collection phase, and it's how it's being interpreted or presented is what we call information. So I'm going to come back to that a little bit later in the presentation, but I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about the difference between data and information. Now, there are 2 types of data. There's primary and secondary. When we're talking about primary data, we're looking at quantities, which is quantitative, and we're also looking at descriptive data, which is qualitative. Now, the second types of data is internal and external. When we're quantitative data is information data that has been counted, measured, uses numbers, has percents probably, decimal points, all those kind of things. And it's broken into 4 areas: open data, process data, shared data, and personal data. Qualitative data asks the question, why? So you'll see qualitative data being used with stories, with ethnographic research. You'll see that kind of information represented through people, right? Through storytelling, through commentary, testimonials, all of those types of things. It's audio recordings, it's pictures of things, it's interview transcripts, it's observations, it's even your notes, right? That type of stuff is the verbal pieces, so to speak, of data. But where is the data for design, right? We understand that the data for design can be qualitative and quantitative. And so with this, we have to begin to look deeper at the sources where we can get the data. And so the sources for the data come in surveys, educational reports, developmental opportunities, and indexes, right? We're going to see a lot of that. And so what I've done is take some time to put together the top 10 most credible and consistent sources of data with numbers about diversity and design. So if you've got your pen and paper out, now's the time to take the notes. So the first one that we have is the United States Census Bureau, and everybody understands what the Census Bureau is, right? Every 10 years, they collect data across the United States, and their goal is to ask every single person who is here, who are they, where they living at, what's going on, and they collect this information every 10 years. Now, the challenge of the Census Bureau is that there are lots of hard to count populations, right? There's lots of hard to count communities who may be having mailing problems, communities who may not be homeowners to receive mail, individuals who may not have, individuals who might be living with other persons, right? But the biggest thing about the Census Bureau to know is that these hard to count populations and communities really give that data this plus or minus effect. And you'll see that a lot of times when you pull data from the Census Bureau. And so the biggest thing here that I want to leave you with is that um, people who are interested in population statistics, who need to know the numbers of the people, probably should start with the census report. The next one is the American Community Survey. Now, the American Community Survey is a survey that happens every year. Now, remember, we talked about the Census Bureau on the census only happens every 10 years. The American Community Survey is what happens every year. In fact, if you Google what is the population of your state right now, the first data that's going to come up is ACP data because they do this every year. So what happens is on year 2, 3, and 4, 7, 8, and 9, the ACS individuals, they use that data to actually estimate and average what the population is. They take those numbers and at the end of the 2, 3, 4, they average it for what is 5. Then they recollect again for 6, 7, and 8, and 9. And then they average that for 10, as well as merging it and matching it up to make sure that everything is consistent with the Census Bureau. So I hope that provides a little bit more information. And they do this for their sample size is about 1 out of every 6 individuals. The next one is CPS, the Current Population Survey. Now, the Current Population Survey is run by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, this is a monthly sample survey used to determine workforce and labor. So, again, if you are looking up population information in conjunction with workforce, then the CPS survey is what you're going to want to utilize to be able to thoroughly access that information. Now, the CPS, as we shared before, is connected with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics looks at labor economics, it looks at labor statistics data, it targets labor information, it asks the employers about people who work for them, it collects numeric data that should be aligned with the census data. So if your employer says, hey, I have 5 people working at my organization, they should be able to find these same 5 people when we do the census report that happens every 10 years or within the ACS information that happens every single year. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics is where you want to go when you're trying to find information about the people and who they work for and where they work. The next one is the Survey of Income and Program Participation. We call this one SIP. Now, SIP data is a small sampling size, but it tracks people for a longer period of time, and it looks at how things change over time. They try to stay within their in series of decades, right? So they analyze information about people in small sample sizes over 5 and 10 year periods of time. Hope that makes some sense. So the big thing to understand here is that this is the premier source of information for income and program participation. It looks at economic well-being, family dynamics, educational information, assets, health insurance, child care, food security, all of these types of things. And again, you can find the SIP data at the Census Bureau website. Now, the next one is called EPUMS or IPUMS, and it stands for the Integrated Public Use Microdata Series. And the EPUMS data collects, preserves, and harmonizes the U.S. Census microdata, and it provides easy access to the data with enhanced documentation. Sometimes it's a little challenging to go through the Census Bureau website as well as the data and the charts that they offer. EPUMS might be a great place to start in the beginning, especially if you're having some challenges finding and locating data at the Census Bureau level. Now, the EPUMS collects, preserves, the data includes things from the census, and it goes as far back as 1790 up to 2010, and it's in conjunction with the American Community Surveys ACS data. Our next one is the Occupational Informational Network. Now, ONET is what we call this one, and ONET data it details information on a specific thing in labor. So again, this is a really, really great site to go to if you're looking for something specific in your profession, in your discipline, in your area of work. This tool is a career exploration and a job analyst tool. It has detailed descriptions of the world of work, and it's used by job seekers, workforce development persons, HR professionals, students, researchers, and tons of other people. Now, we also have data that is collected specifically through our educational system. And one of the primary pieces of data collection there is called the NASAD report, or the Higher Education Arts Data Summary. And they call this the HEADS report. Now, the HEADS report, I'm horribly biased because the HEADS report is very expensive. All the other pieces of data that I've shared with you are free and accessible online to whomever would want it, to whomever could access it. But the NASAD report, you have to pay. They charge schools and organizations to participate in the data, as well as charging people like myself to be able to get the reports every year. And the last report was like $500. So the NASAD report is incredibly expensive, comes out every year. It reports on about 380 schools, about 340 schools last time I checked. But the good thing about it is that it collects data, demographic data. It collects data on what's happening in these 300 and odd some schools. It also collects data on the persons who are taking the classes at the schools, as well as persons who are teaching the classes. So if you are near an educational institution and you guys have a really, really awesome library, you might have a copy of the NASAD report in your school. If you're one of the schools that's in the report, you might have that at your library. Unfortunately, if you're not one of the 300 odd some schools that is in the report, you're going to have to find an alternative way to get a current copy of this report. So we can talk a lot about the NASAD. I'm hopeful that some of these questions are about the NASAD report. This is a really, really big deal, you guys. Like, you have to let me know how you feel about paid data. But personally speaking, I think it creates more barriers, not uncovers barriers. The next piece of data that's super important is the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, NCARB for short, and this is where our architectural brothers and sisters are registered at. This is where they get information. This is how they learn about the certification. This is how they work to continue to advance their careers. The NCARB keeps track of each state's architectural practices and requirements. It keeps track of who's passing, who didn't pass, who's certified to practice, just that entire piece of it. And the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, they get a lot of their information and their data from NCARB. The next one is Human Development Index. Now, here in the United States of America, we love to talk about GDP. But GDP only talks about how rich the people are doing, right? Human Development Index, HDI, investigates and analyzes how the people are doing. And one of my favorite places of learning more about the Human Development Index numbers is Measure of America. Now, the Measure of America is a series of books, an amazing website, and we're going to preview and talk about that a little bit more today. But the Measure of America is a tool for measuring human progress. And it looks at these things in many, many different ways. It disaggregates the data by state, congressional district, as well as by gender, race, and ethnicity. The index ranks 50 states, 436 congressional districts, and it looks at and it reveals the disparities within specific groups. Now, the Measure of America, because it reports the information from the Human Development Index data, it looks at the data in three areas: well being, education, and income. And in education, it's looking at educational attainment as well as educational access. So we're also looking at how the people are doing and how much the individuals are doing. So, for instance, we can see here by looking at the visual that's provided that Latinos are ranked second in well-being, whereas African Americans are ranked fifth. In education, African Americans are ranked third, but Latinos are ranked fifth. In income, African Americans, again, are third, Latinos are ranked fifth. So, again, this kind of data helps design because we can then begin to look at who's receiving these degrees. How are the schools doing? Do they have the resources? Are the students coming? Like, all of these types of health, education, and income questions are going to be uncovered within Human Development Index. So check out the Measure of America. It has an amazing, amazing digital tool where you can literally put in a zip code and learn about that community instantaneously. Quite full of great entertainment if you're a data nerd like myself. The next tool from the Human Development Index is called the Opportunity Index. Now, the Opportunity Index is by the Opportunity Nation. It provides data on what opportunity and what access to opportunity looks like in the United States of America. Now, it provides scores for all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, and another 2,000 countries that represent 97% of the United States population. And it looks at economy, education, health, and community. Here, you're looking at how the Opportunity Index ranks states with the most opportunity versus states with the least opportunity. Now, I've been charting a lot of this data since 2015, and you can see here that for the last since 2015, Mississippi, Nevada, and New Mexico have fallen as the last three, the lowest three states for opportunity. And let's not get excited while we're sitting here in Ohio because we only came in at 36. The number one state this year for opportunity was Minnesota. So I'm sure there's lots of conversation and questions around this one, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. Now, I want to close by talking a little bit about what is good data and defining good data. So I'm hopeful that you'll continue to stay in touch with me. Let's have this conversation. Let's figure out how we can get these numbers. Let's figure out how we can apply for better grants, more grants. Let's figure out how we can write and create better products, better experiences. Now, good data is defined with the sample size, the random sampling, is it usable? How has it been analyzed? Who has analyzed it? How was it connected? What was the source? And what are the relevant questions that were asked in collecting this data? One of the biggest goals that we have here at Design Explorer is to continue working with the analysts from each of these organizations so that we can develop a forecast report. So if you're interested in working with me on diving deep in this data and learning more about what's happening in our profession, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can find me at all the social media channels at Design Explorer. We spell Design Explorer real gangster here with 2 R's. And thank you all so much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you have. I'm going to stop sharing my slides.
Thanks, Jacinda.
Woo!
That was a jackpot of amazing information and data. Loved it every step of the way. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We do have some time for questions, and for our Q&A time, I'm handing our questions over to Caroline Chandler. So Caroline, what do we have?
Well, I'm going to start with the more personal question of when did you get into design? Like, when did you become more interested in design? Because most of the time designers kind of shy away from numbers. So How did you get into that? How did you
Like,
stumble into this?
oh, because it was a stumble. It might have like caused like a little bit of bruising like on my face. Like, honestly, what happened was when I was in graduate school and I started, researching this. And when I picked the topic, I had so many individuals like, oh, I don't know how you're going to research that. There aren't any numbers. Like, I don't know how you're going to figure that out. You're going to, they were explaining to me that I might have to change my entire research process because there was no data to back up or to support or to create value for what I was trying to explain. And so I went to our librarian, and they said, hey, there's a few things out that you could probably get into, but so I pulled what I could. I started trying to read it, and Caroline, the numbers, it was like Charlie Brown, like wah, 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 wah. Like the numbers, it was just a flash of numbers before my eyes. Like I was highly overwhelmed. And that being overwhelmed really made me mad. And that's what really made me go, okay, I got to figure like, stop writing, stop designing, figure this out. Like, where is this coming from? What do you mean there's more people other than the Census Bureau who are collecting data? What do you mean there's different data on education and there's surveys, and surveys are different from indexes and I so that took lots of time. But the thing that really kind of like pushed me over, I had to do another research report. I write research reports. I had to do another research report called the Design Diversity Index, and it's online. If you look up Design Diversity Index, I had to start when I did that. When I did the research for that project, the small pieces that I gathered from doing my own research, by the time I got to doing their project, it was like, okay, hold on. Now I don't just need national data. Now I need state data. Now I need local data. And so that's what made me go deeper and deeper and deeper. And what's wonderful is that I came across an awesome, most awesome um, analyst at the Census Bureau. I'm actually working with three analysts right now, one at the Census Bureau, one at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, two at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, one at the Census Bureau. But the gentleman that I've been working the most with, his name is Augustus Anderson, and he has a research report out called "The New El Dorado: Black National Attainment in the Post-Civil Rights Era." And in his research report, he too is uncovering how this data piece can provide more information to help us to make better decisions within our professions, our work, our businesses, like everything. You know what I'm saying? Because I tell my young people this all the time. When you have good information, it's easy to make good decisions. So bad information, bad decisions.
That makes sense. Sarah asks, I'm sure using both ACS and census is helpful since not everyone fills out the census.
Absolutely. In fact, the unique thing about the Census Bureau, remember we talked about those hard to count communities, and it's not just hard to count communities, it's hard to count populations. I also did another research report for, I did another research body of research for Cleveland Votes. They're an organization here in Cleveland where we researched populations and voting. We created 19 infographics with personas about the hard to count populations in their communities and the four factors that influence them the most. So so I have been looking at this thing called data, at this thing called design, and it's the things that it intersects with since like 2014, 2015. And I've done it in many different professions. So I've done it in design, I've done it with national data, state data, local data, and data that intersects with voting rights and education. So being able to figure out these different buckets and where do you go to find it, like, it's super important. I have a lot of colleagues in IDSA, and they're looking to create and write grants. But there's not a lot, the Census Bureau just revealed the numbers of industrial designers in the designers bucket on the designers website. with the Census Bureau. They just that data just came out. So prior to that, it was very difficult to get data to do a grant because when you do a grant, they're like, how many people is this going to affect? What is the need? What is the percentage of the persons that are going to be able to take advantage of these funds? What are the percentage of need? What are the percentage of people who will benefit? And you can't get any of that information unless you know one of these reports to really be able to dig deep. And I hate to hurt organizations' feelings, but that's where I really wanted to make sure I concluded with what is good data. So when I see people talking about, oh, I got the data from Data Center IO, I just be like, yes, Shane, like I already know. I'm already like, really? That's where you got this info? I'm like, because again, unless you're coming from one of these national consistent, right? Because that's, again, these are processes and organizations who have been collecting this data. In fact, the IPUMS data is collected by an organization in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, I believe. Minneapolis or Minnesota. I always get those two confused. But all they do is the EPUMS data. That's it. So like the ACS people, that's all they do. They follow behind the Census Bureau in trying to connect the gaps and connect the dots. So I hope that makes a little sense.
This kind of leads well into how often do these sources conflict with each other, or do they?
All the dang on time. In fact, if you call the Census Bureau right now and call the BLS, you're going to probably get different numbers. What they ultimately try to do is like, hey, the Census Bureau, they take this data, right? They start with the census, and it almost is like a chain reaction, right? It starts this process of, okay, so this is what they're saying. All right, we're going to collect, and then we're going to go back to see what if our numbers are in alignment with theirs. So when you look at data, particularly at the census level, you'll see this thing called plus or minus. You know that little funky sign? It's got like a little plus and a little minus. You're going to see that. And what that means is like, they might say, hey, the percentage of Black designers is 6%, is 5.7% plus or minus 400. So that means that number, I know, right, Amber? You're like, what? That means that number, that 5% is contingent upon that plus or minus and whatever that percentage is for that. So it might be 400, it might be 2%, might be 5, so that's 5%. Remember I told you it's at 72,000, right? So that it might be plus or minus 5% of the set. So this is why this is also what took me down the rabbit hole of keeping regularly checking back, like once a year. It's quite nerdy of me, like, in January, that's what I do. Like, I go back, I rerun numbers, I re-get information. In fact, the Census Bureau has a new tool that also will be coming, that's out, and they're actually testing it now. So that's why I want to do the forecast next year. Hopefully, we connect, and we'll be able to have a big old data party and revealing where the numbers are, what they are doing, how they're affecting us, how they're not, because the other thing is I want to share, did you all know that one of the reports from the Bureau of Labor Statistics reaches out to some of the schools and employers to ask who's employed and how many are employed. So when designers, I know, Amber, so wait a minute, think about this. So you tell one person you're a graphic designer. On your taxes, you say you're a design strategist. On other documentation, you say you are a design specialist. Yeah, bad, because now you're messing up the count. Because remember, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is self-identified data. That's self-identified, meaning like what you put on your taxes, what you told the house, like when you purchase your home, when your employer said, hey, do you live in the city or do you live somewhere else? Or are you, all that self-revealed data, that's what employers give to BLS. So when we switch up our titles, when we add extra stuff in there, when you're messing up the count. Like, you're messing up the count.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's so funny with designers. Our industry is changing all the time. And you're like, well, how am I supposed to describe myself? And who really cares about what I call myself? So when it comes to
Well, let
legal documents, you're like, I don't know what bucket
oh,
to fit in.
well, here's where it gets even crazier. You ready for this?
Mhm.
So the the Census Bureau, they are analysts. They're numbers people. They're data people, right? They don't know what design is. Guess what they did? They asked the schools.
Mhm. What they ask them, like what is design or what do they
What
ask?
is it? What do you call them? How
Oh,
do we measure it? How is it defined? Right? So when our schools switch titles, switch descriptions, update syllabuses, update programs, those types of things cause a ripple
oh,
in the data collection. And realize that the Census Bureau, they don't know about design. That's what took them so long to be able to understand about UX and UI, right? That's what took them so long to be able to begin to chart that data and realize that, remember, we talked about the ACS is happening every year,
mhm.
but the Census Bureau, the census only happens every 10 years. And then the information from the census is what feeds the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so being able, having schools being able to provide current, prompt, consistent information also affects the design and the information. So the census, so for the longest time in the census, in the United States Census Bureau, in the designers bucket, you ready who was in the bucket? They had graphic designers and web designers, floral designers, exhibit designers, screen designers, floral designers, industrial designers, commercial designers, residential designers. Like it was like what I call bad bologna meat. It was like chicken, fish, beef, and pork
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
mixed together, right? And
Mhm.
then to be able to try to get that data to figure out male, female, black, white, Asian, Latino, bi, like what, like to be able to get all of that,
Mhm. So
why
then
did it take so long?
is it your job that you're kind of taking all this yucky baloney information and trying to make sense of it? Is that essentially what the goal is?
The goal is to do that, and the goal is to be able to know what that information is so that I can create better programs,
Mhm. That
right?
makes
How does AIGA really make effective programs without this data?
That actually leads really well into a question from Leslie. I've
Okay.
referenced the AIGA design census as I've looked at diversity disparity. Do you think the AIGA design census provides enough of a sample size and good methodology for a reliable data set?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. When I was chair of the task force, that was one of our biggest challenges. I remember Antoinette is who really laid an awesome foundation for what that should be. And somewhere along the line, the consistency wasn't there. The support wasn't there. I think the first year that they did that, first 2 years that I think they did the census, they ran it in December for like 3.5 weeks. It takes the United States 10. It takes the United States a year to collect Census Bureau data. I can't believe that 75 chapters supported, applied, upload their data in 3.5 weeks. Really? 3.5 weeks? How
Some
long it
people
take y'all to
can
put this
answer a
together?
survey to, yeah, people don't do that.
People don't do that. And no offense, what one of the things that AIGA did that I thought was brave, they made the data open source. So there were a couple of designers who did take the deep dive and analyze that data. So if you go to Medium and look up the AIGA census, you'll see a lot of designers doing data viz based off of it. One of the things I found out when I did look deep in the data, not even 50% of the membership took the census. I told you the first requirement of good data. Let me reread it for those who might have missed it. Sample size.
Um,
So when we are not consistently reporting and taking data and getting information, how do we have good data? So whenever people come to me like, Jacinda, the AIGA census says, I'd be like, really? And then the last piece, my last gripe, again, all of these reports I'm talking with you all about, they have been collecting data for years.
Mhm.
For the census, for the AIGA census to be viable, that thing needs to be consistent for 5 years. But the first 2, 3 years, they switch the questions. The Census Bureau don't switch.
So it's important to have the same questions, like
Mhm.
almost as a constant.
It has to be a constant. It has to be a constant. Remember, sample size, random sampling, right? So like, hey, we're not going to force you all to do it in 3.5 weeks. We're we're going to leave it open for all year, and we're going to advertise to make sure that you all know this is the time. Now is when you have to collect. We need your data. And I love what IDSA is doing right now. They're saying, hey, members, I didn't get your membership information. Can you fill out the demographic data? Right? Like it's these types of things. So understand sample size, random sampling has to be usable. So they do get a check plus because it was open source. Like kudos for that. But how was it analyzed? Who analyzed it? Who's managing it? Who collected it? How they collect it? What was the
We have a couple more questions I would like to
Okay,
get
okay.
to about. I don't disagree, but some of these questions are like, what are the best spaces to meet emerging designers? Um, how might corporations use the data models to measure progress and ensuring change? So like, kind of like pipeline questions. I know there was another one about how might AIGA chapters ensure the growth of emerging BIPOC designers in our local communities? Like,
Yes,
is that
and
the right pipeline to be looking at?
I feel it. So, okay, so first, Amber and Caroline, copy these questions in the chat. I don't have access to them. Copy those. I want you to email those to me so I can make sure I address those. But understand that the pipeline, and again, I talked about this in my last article, the pipeline is a myth, y'all. So stop blaming it on the pipeline. It ain't the pipeline's damn problem. They ain't their fault. People made the pipeline. So it's the people whose fault this is. Like, okay, so that's the first thing. And then when we talk about how can the schools do this, how can they ensure it? They have to make sure that they're either in the NASAD report, that they're in the higher education arts data summary. If they're not, they have to figure it out. Now, here's what I heard from one educator who will remain nameless. They told me that their school would have to literally hire a person to collect and to manage that entire NASAD project, to be able to collect the data from the schools, the departments, the educators, the classes, like one person's job for like the year. So it's a wonder that there aren't more schools participating in this NASAD report. How do they pay that one person to do that? Like,
Yeah.
so it's a for me, it's a what do they call it? Balance. It's a scales, right? It's scales of balance. We have to make sure that we're putting information in so that when we need information back, we can get it. And we also have to make sure that we are regularly participating as professionals, as organizations, as employers, as organizations. That's how this will get better.
And Michael asks, these are important research skills that you're talking about. Would you be open to presenting to middle schoolers?
Listen, I'm on a huge project right now. If you guys Google me or follow me online, you know this already. I'm on a huge project right now. I am set to meet 500 students by December in person. And they are asking so many awesome questions, right? They want nothing more than to find you all. If I have one more Latino student come to me and ask me where are the other Latino designers at, I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry. I am going to flat out just break out in tears, right? So would I be I'm always open for the conversation. I'm always open to presenting. I'm still traveling, doing these talks across the United States about diversity, about my research work, about data, about how to be counted, how to add your voice, right? So yes, call me, stay in touch. Now I will admit I'm taking for emails as long, but I'm coming to my emails. I'm bear with me, please.
Um,
And
Well,
I
I
guess
think, yeah, Caroline, if we have like one more question, anything else left over, we can put Jacinda's information in our Slack channel. That way people can reach out directly and also read an article or two while they're at it. So,
It's plenty of them, plenty articles.
good. Caroline, let's go with one more.
Ooh, okay, how about Leslie asks, speaking of consistent the question of consistency, how do you deal with getting info on gender spectrum diversity?
Oh, listen, if you think race and ethnicity was hard. When I worked on the project with Cleveland Votes, that was one of our hugest challenges, right? How do we go to organizations who say their membership is private and report? How do we collect data from organizations who have told their members we're not going to say anything? We're not going to like. So that layer of intersectionality is something that we need to come to the table and figure this out, y'all. Because we won't be able to create better programs, more programs, consistent programs without that data. And so organizations that deal in this gender, sex, religion, these are tough organizations to break through, to actually dig deep and collect data on, especially for public usage.
Yeah,
Way deep.
definitely some things for us to take away.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's give a virtual round of applause for Jacinda. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before we leave, I want to give another shout out to our sponsors this year for Midwest Design Week. Again, any updates on event information throughout the week can be found on Slack and also Jacinda's information, so check out for that. Please do sign up for our Slack community with your fellow creatives. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us on Slack via the Midwest Design Week support channel or direct message from anyone on the organizing team. We can help you out with whatever you need. I hope to see everyone at tonight's collaborative event with AIGA Unidos, allowing opportunity and creating a channel for it by Ariana Cruz, happening today at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard, 4 p.m. Central Standard. So again, Jacinda, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Catch you tonight. Bye.
Bye.